Okay, this is the third part of Chapter 6 in the last section, where we get into, or continue to get into eukaryotes. So there's all kinds of unicellular organisms. We've already previously talked about prokaryotes a bit. There are also unicellular eukaryotes, although less common. But they're mostly multicellular. Now, the earliest multicellular eukaryotes, basically, we have our fossils are about 1.2 billion years ago, and they're very small algae that we know about. And we can date a common ancestor between eukaryotes and prokaryotes back 1.5 billion years ago. So the large organisms beyond those single-celled algae did not appear in the fossil record until a few 100 million years later. So here, for example, we have a 570 million-year-old fossil that is believed to be animal embryos from China. Here's a two-cellular stage and multicellular stage embryo developing. And here again we see algae cells or algal cells forming colonies. They can survive individually on their own, but they form colonies and exchange nutrients and so on. Some cells in those colonies become specialized and can form or perform different functions, and thus transfer different things between cells. So one cell does one metabolic reaction, and another cell does a different one, and then they can transfer their byproducts and share, forming a colony or a community, if you like. Another major or commonly talked about episode within the geologic record is called the Cambrian explosion. And the Cambrian explosion is the cause of, or attributed to, the majority of animal species on Earth today. It's unclear how it occurred, but suddenly in the fossil record, during the first 20 million years of the Cambrian period, we got a large number of the major phyla of animals, all at the same time, including Cnidaria and Porifera. Those are somewhat older. They came before. From those, or separate from those, occurred the Cambrian explosion. But Cnidaria, for example, are jellyfish, and Porifera are corals, among other things. So we can look at molecular evidence, looking at the number of differences genetically in DNA or in protein structure, proteins that are shared. And we can see that the animal phyla began to diverge about 1 billion to 700 million years ago. This is where we show differences starting to rack up, as opposed to just on one date for the Cambrian explosion. We do know that plants, fungi, and animals have been on land for about 500 million years ago. They colonized land about 500 million years ago. And there is a symbiotic relationship between plants and fungi that still occurs to this date, such as in root nodules, fungi growing alongside roots to assist nutrient uptake and nutrient production. Continental drift, we do know, everybody's probably heard of Pangea before. We know that the Earth continents are not fixed and they're constantly moving on the Earth's surface, almost visually like proteins can move on a plasma membrane. And this is due underneath to the hot mantle that's always bubbling and moving and so on. And you can see these plates shifting and moving. These are also the plates that cause our earthquake faults, and why we have earthquakes here. We have this fault there. And that's also why volcanoes also form along these plate lines as they get pushed up from the plates pushing against each other. Here you see that volcano forming. Okay, here you see an ocean ridge or a trench forming tied to that. So all these things due to the movement of plates. And we already talked about Pangea just a second ago. Almost done here. So we're constantly re-updating our view of the tree of life and how organisms are related to one another. And more recently, we've begun to use molecular data to compare genetic sequences between species and see really how similar or dissimilar are they. Originally, we had two classification systems, plants and animals, two kingdoms. But then Robert Whitaker said, no, we should use 5 kingdoms: Monera, Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. We now know that we don't stick with just those 5. We go beyond that, and we even have a 3-domain system. which is archaea. You know, those are prokaryotes. Bacteria, which are also prokaryotes, and then eukarya, which is all the eukaryotes. And then we split those into more specific kingdoms. So here, for example, you see bacteria and their subdivisions. Archaea is here, and then eukarya is all these over here. We then continue. Eukarya breaks down into plants, fungi, and animals, of course. And we're done.